This is Writer Life, a podcast about writing, life, coffee and conversation, with Rob and John Morgan.
Hello, and welcome to my new podcast, Writer Life. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Robin John Morgan, and I'm a writer. I have several books published, of which I began with the dystopian fantasy adventure series, Heirs to the Kingdom. I'm currently working on a new series, of which 3 have been published, which are contemporary modern slice-of-life stories about a young girl and her friends who are caught in a culture clash with older generations living in a rural English country village. In between all of that, I've managed to publish Rise of the Raven, a dark political fantasy, and Hans Cottage, which is an enchanted magical fairy story for grown-ups set around the issues of loss, grief, and the hope that we all hold for the future. This podcast has grown out of necessity, as I've written blogs about my work for over 15 years, of which I have a great many on my blog site, attached to the website heirstothekingdom.com. Now it appears that today people would rather sit back and listen rather than read a blog or even a book. Hence, here I am launching the podcast. It is actually sad in a way that less people today read compared to my youth, but I hope in some small way that over the coming podcasts people will start to realise that even though watching films are a wonderful experience, nothing actually beats picking up a book, sitting quietly and just reading. The books that I write can be read easily and enjoyed as the simple story on the page. But if, like myself, you like to peel back the layers and look deep into a story to find all of those loose ends and threads, then this could well be the place for you to come and listen. The podcast is being planned in a few ways. Firstly, as the author, some of the episodes will feature my take on the books that I have written. I hope to be able to open up those stories and give a much deeper insight, not only to the story, but also to the process of writing them. Other episodes, I hope to feature guests and do informal coffee and conversations as we talk about books and the experience of reading and all of the experience that we've had, or I've had, in writing them. One other aspect that I'm working on is that I intend to open up my files and show some of the background of what goes on behind the scenes when actually constructing the stories that I write. I've been playing around with an AI program and learning how to use it. I want to be able to have the program read some parts of the stories that I write, especially the bits that have been edited out. It's not always easy to get everything I want into the books. There is always some part, because of page counts and so forth, that needs to be taken from the book. So there will be some special little bits where I reveal some of the story that was actually cut. And that will hold some extra secrets of the books that I have actually been able to publish. I've decided to run this podcast through YouTube. And that is mainly because it's an easier platform for me to use. I'm not as great with computers as maybe my younger counterparts, possibly because I was raised long before the internet even happened. One of the big issues that I'm going to encounter with YouTube is its censorship, which anyone who knows me will know. I absolutely hate censorship of all platforms and books. Now sadly, I have to play by the rules. And so you may find that an author like myself, who has published things like the Curio Chronicles, which are actually a very sex and body positive series, I will be forced into a position where some wording will need to be altered so as not to offend the YouTube rules, which actually, to be honest, are quite Puritan in their nature. So you may find words like spicy appearing in some of the conversations that we have, referring to things like bedroom fun. It's just a way of avoiding the algorithm sort of flagging it. Because if these videos get flagged for this podcast, then they'll be taken down. and I'm going to try and do my best to avoid that. That's about as much as I can divulge at this point, because, this is a new podcast, and so I'm going with the flow to see where I end up. Now, no doubt, my creative brain will head off on a tangent at some point, and there is absolutely no knowing what I'm going to be coming up with to keep things entertaining. Okay, right. For the first podcast, I thought it would be kind of nice to kind of go back and, to a degree, start at the beginning and then move on from there. And recently, I was going over my blog and I came across a post that I actually wrote in May of 2022. Now, like all the blogs that I write, once they've been published, I kind of go back and I always feel that they could be improved. And so, considering the subject material, I thought it would actually be really good for a start here, as in a way, it journals some of my journey towards actually becoming a writer. Now, the blog was entitled, Why Read? Why Write? And you can read the original if you just head over to the heirstothekingdom.com website and click blogs. It's on there with hundreds and hundreds of other pieces that I've written over the years. So, why do people write? Or even read, for that matter? Seriously, what is the point in wasting your time when you could be working, making real money? That has been said to me many times, and I always feel that those people completely miss the point. I cannot count the number of times that a person has announced, almost with pride, I don't read books. Now, I'll not deny, it makes me cringe. And it's not that they do not read them, it's more of the fact that they feel this is something they should actually be proud of. I'm an avid reader and also a writer of books, so for me, a book is a magical form of transportation into someone else's world. I feel books show the world as it really is, or at least how it should be. It's almost like a time-travelling device, as you get to visit different lands and meet different people. And it really is the one time where the date becomes irrelevant, because you can walk with dinosaurs, sail with pirates, fight in wars, or even travel to new planets and meet tiny inhabitants of a fairy realm. Books for me are an incredible medium. Books teach us about injustice. They show us compassion, empathy, and determination. Writers for eons have poured their hearts and souls into what they write, and in doing so, they have broadened our minds, expanded our insights, and allowed us to accompany them on their journeys. Books, to be honest, are a tiny moment captured in space and time. When you read Shakespeare, or Dickens, or H.G. Wells, John Wyndham, you get to see so many different aspects of life, of humanity, of people and their personalities. And you get to walk in so many different time periods and actually interact with the people of those moments. Being a writer is not always easy. You have to dig deep and feel everything. I've sat at my desk, lost in the worlds that I have created, and I've also wiped the tears from my eyes as I typed. And there are times when I've also had to stop, as I laughed so hard with my characters. I just had to take a moment and sit back. To me, it's a wonderful experience, and yet so many people I meet state they could never write a book. And I always think, well, why? You can actually. You just need to sit down and tap into your wild imagination and connect it with what you're actually feeling. I fear the world is now divided, and it has become two distinct kinds of people. There are those who read, and then there are those who have absolutely no concept of the joy that they are missing, because they don't read. I fear we live in a world distracted by money and attention-drawing pleasures, and it has become a sad state of reality that people would rather switch on a TV and stream something rather than open a book. My journey towards this point has, to be honest, it's been an interesting one, as I've gone through all sorts of mishaps and all manner of disappointment. And there was a time in my life where I would write to overcome the pain I felt in darker times. And in some strange and unexplainable way, I realized it was an important part of a very special journey that would lead me to sitting full-time at my desk and putting my hopes and dreams onto paper, albeit in a coded fashion. I suppose all that really leaves me is to ask the question, well, how did that happen? In 1994, I took a 5-day holiday. I was exhausted, but I worked for a company where the boss had told me a good few times, your job will always be safe with us. We will never ever let you go. Now at that time, I really needed to hear that. Oh, no one really has any idea how much that meant to me. I had worked hard, long hours for that company. I'd given it my all. I would even say that I gave them the very best of me. I loved that place, I adored the job, and I cared very deeply for the people that I was working with. Working with plants and nature for me personally was a deeply special experience. I love the natural world. I always have. In my days as a child, I had the delight of growing up with a woodland right over my fence. I could literally climb over the fence and spend my days running wild, climbing trees, and connecting to the world in a way that few at that time had a chance to do. It gave birth to a deep infinity within me, and all of my life I've taken joy from the greenness of the world that surrounds me. So working with plants, for me, it was kind of less of a job and more of a privilege. Especially when I ended up in a very beautiful garden centre, which in essence, to be honest, was just a huge garden for me to play in every single day. For me at that time in my life, being a horticulturalist was something I took great pride in, because what I did for a living actually made the world a more beautiful place to be in. In a strange sort of way, I've always known because of the thousands of plants and trees that I have created. On the day of my death, I will know I will indeed leave this world far more beautiful than the one that I was born into. Now I had holidays owed to me because, well, I never really wanted to take any. I loved working there so much. And in 6 months prior to my holiday, I'd separated from my partner. It was not an easy breakup, and I ended up becoming a single parent. And I'll not deny, the pressure of working and not letting my employer down, which I didn't, combined with raising a young girl alone and juggling the bills I had discovered after my partner left, it really was started to take its toll on me. The breakup had been hard and very stressful, not just on me but also on my daughter at the time. And I still feel it had a huge negative impact on her life, and it did change her forever. So when told I had to take a holiday or I would lose the dates, I took it. And I had a week alone in Wales with my daughter, and I rested up, and it was really, really needed. I arrived back in work a week later on the Monday morning, and 5 minutes later, I was unemployed. And I was so shocked, I could hardly speak. Saying goodbye to everyone was soul-crushing for me, and having to walk away from a place that I loved so dearly absolutely destroyed me completely. I've never forgotten that moment as I walked out of the gates and I looked back across the small bridge, and there and then I swore to myself that after the betrayal that I felt, I would never give my all to anyone else again. From that moment onwards, I vowed I would only ever work for me, and I have been true to that vow ever since. I'm not going to deny, life got really hard after that, and I struggled to survive. And yet even though my confidence crashed, and I fought like hell to stay afloat through what became a really bad bout of depression, I managed to do what I did best at that time. I saved up all my spare change, I propagated plants, and slowly I built a business that was just for me. Against the odds, I felt like hell to survive, and in my spare time, I attended night school to occupy my mind. One other thing that I did was I wrote stories, one of them in particular. After all, when you've been working from dawn till dusk for years, suddenly being out of a job, you realise you've got a lot of spare time on your hands. In many ways it was therapeutic, and today I really do feel that it saved me. It certainly helped restore my sanity and my devastated feelings. And slowly my confidence began to grow again, as writing my thoughts down on paper brought me back to life. I actually wrote a journal about my whole life up until that point, and it was thousands of pages long, and when I finished, I read through it, and then I burned it. What I learned from that experience was the true meaning of facing the truth, and it became a big part of the way that it would shape me for the future. I actually learned to be free and lose the fear, especially when I was writing. Night school taught me counselling and psychology, as I did online courses. Daytime allowed me the space to build up the stock for my new horticultural business, and all my spare moments and all my weekends gave me the time to write. And very slowly, between 1994 and 2005, I got my life back together. My business was not easy to build because I had so little cash to start with. But as a plant propagator, I had skill and I had knowledge, and so I used it, and I ended up with 5,000 British pounds worth of high quality stock. It was then I started to book market stalls and begin trading. I built the business up very slowly. It was a tough time, and I was not rich, but there again, I'd lived on almost nothing for a while, and so the money I made, whilst not being a huge amount, was far more than I was used to. Finally, in the early 2000s, I took on a wooden market building, and I fitted it out with an investment of all of my own cash. I started counselling in my spare time, in a voluntary capacity, mainly to help kids, which as I learned more skills and I got more training, I moved into sexual dysfunction, relationships and abuse, and I started to work with younger adults moving up into older generations. I always worked for free. I've never charged any client. I saw them as victims, so why would I charge them when it was actually the abuser who I felt should pay? Once again, I was laughed at and I was told, "You should charge, you're an idiot. You could be rich." But these people had no idea at all about the value of life and actually owning your own. Through it all, I wrote. There was a little bit here and a new idea there, and slowly over many years, one story in particular really started to grip my imagination. I mean, hell, it still does. I'm still writing things for it behind the scenes. The one thing I will say without hesitation is actually since 1994, no matter what I have done, and as many people who have laughed at me will tell you, I never did any of that for money. I did it because it was simply what I wanted to do. I've never forgotten the helplessness I felt stood in that office after a holiday I was forced to take, and then being told that the job I loved so dearly was being taken away from me. Ironically, it was by the same man who had promised I would never lose the job. I knew then no one would ever have that power over me again, and since that day they haven't. Now in 2006, the local council told me that I was going to lose my tenancy because they wanted to pull down the market and build a garden-style public square. How ironic. They booted out the gardener, and again, I had to face the reality, and I will not deny, I was pissed off. And so I fought the local council, and everybody again laughed at me, and they told me, "Oh, you'll lose everything." I just laughed back at them, and I told them, "You know what, I know, but I'm gonna do this anyhow." They were right. I lost pretty much most of my savings and ended up with a garden full of stock I couldn't sell. And yet in a way, it kind of made me laugh, because I'd been here before. Now luckily for me, in 2006, I also began to write my story, the one that had been stuck in my head for such a long time. A friend of mine got to read it and told everybody it was amazing. And I told him, "I've got no hope of publishing this." And he just laughed at me, and he told me, "Why don't you do it anyway?" And so I did. I shocked everyone who knew me by announcing, "Do you know what? I'm giving up horticulture and I'm walking away from it." It left them speechless. Some even laughed at me and they told me, "You're so stupid. It's your wife. Everybody knows you're the go-to guy for plants. What the hell is wrong with you? Are you deliberately trying to ruin your life? It's kind of ironic because the people telling me that were the very same people who, when I set up, told me I was an idiot and I'd never make any living out of it. I just shrugged it all off. I was absolutely done with life at that point. I was tired and weary of the long, hard hours, the freezing cold, wet days, and I wanted more out of life than I was actually getting. If I was going to do something that sucked up all of my day, it was going to be something that gave me a restful peace and the freedom to live as I wanted to. And so I published The Ballad of Locksley, my very first book in the series Heirs to the Kingdom. I published it with a new self-publishing business. The publisher charged me almost all of the savings that I had at the time, and I ended up getting screwed because I never got a single penny in royalties. And so I cancelled my agreement and told those all around me, you know what, sod it, I'll publish my own books. In 2013, I sat down and started to learn as much as I could on how you actually publish a book. Now, it took me a while, and there was a lot to learn, and there was a lot of new programs that needed to be involved, and I had to learn those. But on January the 1st, 2014, I launched my imprint, and I became a publisher, and the company VCP took off. I did a full rewrite of all the published works I'd done, which was 3 books, and I put them back out. Now again, I invested everything I had left in the bank. I crossed my fingers and hoped to hell it worked, as I was really close to the wire on this one. And this time, I really had nothing at all to fall back on. Well, I'm still here 9 years later. Am I rich? Nope. Do I care? Nope. Why? I'm a writer. And I learned something very important as I faced all of the trials of my life. What I learned was betrayal from my family, employers and friends, false promises, fake personalities, people-pleasing, guilt, lust, desire, greed, power, conceit, arrogance, shaming, fighting, simple living, survival, anxiety and dark thoughts, temper, abuse, victimization, bullying, and 1,000 other things. I had the advantage of a window into so many other people's lives, as well as my own. And I did not realize at the time how important each of those moments of learning would become to my future. When I was 10 years old, my grandfather, he sat me down with a copy of Ivanhoe, and he made me read it out loud to him. Watching him sat listening to me as I read is still actually one of my fondest memories of him growing up. I loved how he would occasionally smile or nod his head, and the way in which the story impacted on him. And it made me a reader forever. Now, it was not always easy because I had dyslexia, and at times I confused words and got them mixed up, but it never stopped me from reading. And I've struggled to overcome that all my life. It literally has been a 40-year project where I learn to recognize the patterns and undo them as I work. I have grown to love Philip Pullman, Arthur Conan Doyle, Tolkien, John Wyndham, H.G. Wells, and countless other writers. And I've read thousands of books throughout my life. I learned to love stories of life, and my wonderful English teacher from school, Miss Casey, she inspired me to read more. To Kill a Mockingbird, Roots, 1984, A Brave New World, The Chrysalids. They changed me forever. I understood now. They also taught me something. They taught me what a good story is like for the reader. It has to be honest, written straight from the hip, and confrontational if it needs to be. But it also has to be alive with wonder. And suddenly, I understood something very important. At age 44, I knew a good story, and I understood life better than anyone ever realized. And finally, something that had been more of a hobby in my past became the focus of my life to come. You see, I love daydreaming and making up stories. I love people watching and listening to their own stories of the lives that they have lived. I absolutely love writing them down, and armed with a life seen as filled with mishaps by others, and working with hurt, broken people, I had an arsenal of information built perfectly for my future, because I aimed at that point to be a writer forever. And now here I am, aged 59 years old, and I actually am a writer. My first job that I mentioned taught me how to use arrogance, complacency, greed, betrayal and survival. It taught me the value of friendship and camaraderie, and the humour we bounce off each other working in difficult conditions. Being alone, raising a female child who hated me for throwing her mum out, it taught me loneliness and dealing with the stress and the pressure of taking care of others. That became heirs to the kingdom. My fight with the council and some of their dirty tricks taught me about those who felt entitled by their position and how they can abuse people because they're so ruthless and they can just toss them away without a care. It all made heirs to the kingdom even better, and it added such a powerful weight to the lead characters that they walked off the pages like real people to those who read them. My time as a counsellor taught me abuse. It taught me shame and victimization. I learned about sexual behaviours and practices, manipulation and self-hatred. And it became the foundation of the Curio Chronicles. It really gave me an insight into a life behind closed doors that very few knew about. And it has allowed me to follow the life of my character Abigail and some of her friends as they go through life against a community that is set against them. I can hold up a mirror to modern society and show the real truth behind the fake morality of this day and age. Why? Because I've been there and I've lived it with other people. That bad first long-term relationship, it taught me the real pain and anguish of betrayal. Control of an arrogant boss, lies and deceit, combined with a corrupt council, gave me everything that I would ever need to work into the dark fantasy of Rise of the Raven. The battle of Branna to stay true to her word and fight through the darkness for Ariel, her hatred for the fake image of Rhiannon. Well, I have lived that and seen it. For me, it was real. It was painful. For Branna, it became her story to overcome the dark, to keep her love for Ariel alive and strong. In 2007, I met a young woman. She was an artist, a reader, and a very creative person, and she changed my life forever. Her example became parts of Runestone, Jade, and Jet. She inspired Abigail and Birch and Chloe, and also played a role in the relationship of Ariel and Branna. She added to the value of the person that I was, and she became my wife. The daughter that we had has been an inspiration for other characters, and again, it has all added to my later life as a writer. Not one day passes that I do not sit back and consider myself to now be a man of great wealth, and yet I have very little in the bank. 9 years ago, I lost someone who was incredibly special to me. They were very, very significant in my life, and it is something that had a huge impact on me. I never quite recovered from the blow of losing her. I've not really spoken about it. I've probably been very quiet on my thoughts of it. Some say I should deal with it and just get over it. And I've continued to live my life as normally as possible and just tried to ignore them. That aspect of me has appeared in small parts of the story that I worked on for several years. Although no one will really know which parts are from me, it has helped me to write it, to come to terms with it. Now, once again, my teacher and instructor for writing are those I've read and those that have impacted my life. Not that long ago, I was told, you need to make more money. You'll never be rich. Do something more valuable to society. I simply smiled at how stupid they sounded to me. I'm a writer. There is nothing more valuable to society. I am a writer, nothing more. But you know what? I love it. I've been called a dystopian writer, a fantasy writer, even a writer of kink, which made me laugh at the time. I have books in the fiction, the Arthurian, LGBT, battle, magic, fantasy, rural. There's so many genres. I'm quite sure there are many others that I'll appear in over time. But you see, I don't really pay that much attention to them, as I see myself as a slice of life writer. I take a character and I write their story, the whole living truth of it, regardless of where it is set, be it fantasy or real. I'm a teller of tales, nothing more. It makes me so happy. Now I'm told I should sell myself more, or I will never be rich. It's like it's some form of prerequisite for the successful life. Well, I can assure you, I'm never going to tick that particular benchmark soon. And actually, I don't really care. I don't write because I want to be on the bestsellers list. I write because it makes me happy. Money is not everything. I love what I do. I love being able to sit for days and use my mind and my dreams and my creativity to write down all of these amazing and wonderful characters that are a pale patchwork taken from the reality of everyone I've ever met. My thoughts and my words paint the picture of a character that comes alive on the page. And to me, that is real magic. In essence, that is the joy of reading. Every book opens up an aspect of life we never really knew about. Each book is a challenge on some level, and we may not always agree with a part of it, but our eyes are still opened. We can sit alone and live many different lives and experience the unknown, which in turn expands our horizons and broadens our minds. And that is why I write. You see, all those writers that I have loved throughout my entire life, well, they did the same, and it has helped me through the life that I have lived, and I aim to continue that tradition on. Life's not about fast cars, big houses, and designer labels. It's actually about being real and being honest with yourself, admitting your flaws and embracing them, and living a life that has a real value, not a monetary value. And you will find all those things and all those qualities to teach you in books. That moment with a loved one, when your eyes catch that momentary glance they stole of you, and you smile to yourself. And those moments when your child will turn to you and just says, quite out of the blue, "I love you, Dad." Or that joy of a parent who looks at you and says, "I'm proud of you, son." Those really count. They have true meaning, and no amount of money can buy them. And they're also inspiration for the words you put on a page. Knowing the darkness will pass, or that no matter how hard life gets, you'll make it through. You have no idea what that's going to look like, but you know you will get there. Being smacked down and having to get up again when you feel you're at your worst, but knowing that was the lowest point, and from here on you will rise again. That is the true value of life. The life you will read in books. That is what I write, and it's what I write about. Because one day someone as lost and feeling as hopeless as I did, they will read my words, and just like I did, they will start over and they will move forward again. That is why I write. So once again, I'm going to ask the question, why do we read? And why do we write? Simply put, because we should. Because within those pages, the answer to inspire you is waiting, or it's in need of being written down. We live in a world that is losing the ability to understand why books are written. And my best advice to everybody listening today would simply be this: never be one of those people. Books have the wisdom to guide you forward. And forget that at your peril and keep reading. If you cannot find that one book you really desire to read, then sit down and write it. Because you do have the skills, you just don't realize it. You've already lived them. So go read or write. I hope you enjoyed that. It was good fun to do it. A little stressful, that I really enjoyed putting this first podcast together. Please, if you've enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, like the video, because that really does help the algorithm to get shared around the rest of YouTube, and that will give more readers a chance to find this channel and listen in. If you did enjoy it, and if you do like my books, or you do like the idea of some of the things that I have written, please look me up on social media, because Robin John Morgan Writer is on Facebook, he's on Tumblr, Instagram, Twitter, and a few other places. And check out my website, heirstothekingdom.com. If you can, go around, like, comment, add little things to the posts, just so that you can help other people see your enjoyment of the things that I create. I have no idea what I'm bringing next. I've got a few things lined up, and so what I will say now is thank you very, very much for supporting the podcast, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Writer Life podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, or there are areas of Robin's stories you would like him to discuss, please add your thoughts and questions in the comments, and we will include them in a future episode. You can follow Robin on all his social media links, which you will find listed below, and please, like and subscribe to this channel, so you get the latest notifications when he posts. All Robin's books are available in digital and print formats to purchase or download through all online book sales sites.